In this video, we'll talk about the check buttons and radio buttons used in your widgets. So the widgets basically contain many of your entries. Two of them is your check button and your radio button as well as. So in this, we'll talk about the check button, that is how they are used, what is their need, how the variables are assigned, and the options available with the check buttons and your radio buttons. So first of all, we'll cover the check button. Now, talking about the check button widget is the standard ticketer widget used to implement on-off selections. Now, check button widget is used to display a number of options to user as toggle buttons. Check button is a multiple choice input widget. The user can then select one or more options by clicking the button corresponding to each option. Check buttons can contain text or images, and you can associate a Python function or a method with that each button defined. That is, when the button is pressed, ticketer calls that function automatically. Now, each check button widget should be associated with a variable. In fact, the ticketer variables are central to the operations of several check buttons that implements a multiple choice interface by assigning each button a variable of its own. So next we'll talk about the syntax, that is the check button widget is used to choose between two distinct values. So here's the simple syntax to create the widget, that is your master. First of all, it's the check button with C as your capital, a function. In that you are defining the master and the options. So the master represents my parent window. Option is again the list of most commonly used options for this widget. Now, in terms of program code, check buttons resemble normal buttons. They are even packed with a container widget. Operationally, they are a bit different. You can have a look on the program. That is just a simple program for two check buttons, that is your male and your female, so that you can see the output as well as. Basically, a check button works as a toggle. Pressing one changes its state from off to on or from on to off again. Now moving ahead, there are some options available in this widgets which help in configuring those widgets. You can have a look on the options. That is, the very first is the active background. Background color when the check button is under the cursor. Then we have active foreground, that is for your foreground color when the check button is under the cursor. That is, next is your BJ, that is normal background color displayed behind the label called. Then we have is your command. Now command option lets you register a callback to be run immediately on your button press events, much like your normal button widgets. But by associating a ticketer variable with the variable option, it has been associated with your function call. Next we have is your height, that is number of the lines of your text on your check button. Then we have off value. Check button's associated control value will be set to 0 when it is cleared. Then we have on value. Over here the check button's associated control variable will be set to 1 when it is set or on. Next is the variable. Now this associates a ticketer variable to the button, that is, whenever you will be using the check button, you have to bring a variable declaration with your check button. So this was all about your options in check button. Next we'll talk about the methods associated with your check button. So there are some few methods associated with this widget. We'll look into them one by one. That is your deselect. Now this simply deselects the checkbox, that is sets the value to do of your off value. Then we have is your flash. Flashes the check button a few times between its active and normal colors, that is redraws the button alternating between your active and your normal appearances. Then we have is your invoke. Call to get the same actions that will occur if the user clicked on your check button. Then we have is your select. This selects the button, that is sets the value to your on value. So these are the main methods you associated with your check button. Next we'll talk about the need of the variable over callback in your check button. Why do we need ticketer variable here at all? when we can register button press callback. See, the linked variables may seem superfluous at first glances, but they simplify some GUI codes. Instead of asking you to accept this blindly through your set me explain why, keep in mind that a check button's command callback will run on every press, whether the press toggles the check button to be selected or deselected state. Because of that, if you want to run an action immediately when a check button is pressed, you will generally want to check the button's current value in the callback handler. As because there is no check button get method for fetching the values, you usually need to integrate an associated variables to see if the button is on or off. Moreover, some GUIs simply let users check or set the check buttons without running the command callbacks at all and fetch buttons setting at some later point in your programs. So this was all about the need of the variable over your callback. Next, we'll look into the hands-on we have for that is the program for this check button. So one by one, I'll be showing you the check button program. That is the very basic, simple check button program. That is, I have already shown in your screenshot. That is, just have a look. Print. That is from Tkinter, you're importing all, making the master window, making the integer variable. This is the call of integer variable var1. Now, each integer, that is, each check button is having this integer variable to get associated with. That is, you can see the check button over my master window, which displays the text as my variable, has been set to the variable as your var1, which is the integer value, and the positions have been defined by a grid over here. Similarly, I have used the text as your female and the value I have provided is your var2, simply looping it out. So now let's see the output of this program. That is, you can have a look on the screen. This is the simple output where I'm checking my male and female check boxes. You can multiply check the boxes, that is the check box. Either you can use the one by one or you go for your one to many. Let's have a look on the another program I have over here. That is from Tkinter. I'm importing all. The master I've set as your TK. I've made a function which is your variable states. Now this will tell me how many times the values has been selected. That is, male is selected how many times, female is selected how many times by this get method, which is associated to the each variable defined. Now you can see later I have a label, that is the sex, which is asking me the gender over here, and the grade I have stored it. Now I am making the integer variable. Now this integer variable will be associated to my male and another integer variable will be associated to my female. So whenever I'll press the button, that is your quit and your show will give me the that is variable state, that how many times I have selected the male, how many times I have selected the female, and quit button will simply end up the Tkinter application. So let's have a look on the output of this program. See, the variable get will be represented on your shell. You won't have a look on your Tkinter application. The application you are making is just this, that is your male, female, and when I'm doing the show, you can have a look on the shell over here. That is, the shell is giving me the male and female check 1 and 1. So ultimately, when I'll show, when I'll click, that is again when I'll click on my male or your female, it will give me 0 and 1 values on selecting and deselecting the values. Now let's see another example for this check button. That is, I'm having another variable, another example for this check button where I'm using the various entries. That is, I'm importing the TK message box as well as the Tkinter. Simply making the window, that is your top as the name of your Tkinter, making two variable, integer variable with checkvar1, checkvar2 as their name, as well as checkvar3, that is your third integer. The two check buttons I have made, that is for your music and video, and the check button, the third one has the text, that is your possible. With that I have provided your height, width, active, and with the others I have the on, off, and your variables. Simply packing them all and looping, that is printing them on my window. So let's have a look on the output so that you can understand it better. Now you can see in the output has a very basic, that is the blue has been covered with your music, red has been covered as your video. Now when I'm clicking this, it is turning that is red into your yellow over here. Similarly, when I'm taking your blue, the blue is basically taking to your magenta color. You can see the kind of an orangish color when you'll click on this or deselect it. Similar with your possible is taking your blue color when you're deselecting or selecting it automatically. So this was all for your check button. Next we'll talk about the radio button. Now talking about your radio button is a standard ticketer widget used to implement out of many selections. Now this widget implements a multiple choice button, which is a way to offer many possible selections to the user and lets the user choose only one of them. And though the difference between your check button and radio button is that radio button selects only one entry at a time, and the check button can select multiple entries at one time. So in order to implement this functionality, each group of the radio button must be associated to the same variable, and each one of the buttons symbolizes a single value. You can use the tab key to switch from one radio button to the another. Next, a radio button, sometimes called optional button, is the graphical user interface element of the ticketer, which allows the user to choose one of the predefined set of the options. That is, the radio buttons can contain text or images, and a Python function or method can be associated with the radio button. This function will be called if you press the radio button. Now, radio buttons are named after these physical buttons used on radios to select the wave bands. If such buttons were pressed, other buttons would pop out, leaving the pressed button the only pushed in your button. The buttons can display your text in a single font, but the text may span more than one line. So this was all about your radio button. Next we'll talk about the syntax of your radio button. And I can see that is the simple syntax to create the widget. That is, your master represents your parent window. Again, options is the list of the most commonly used options for this widget. Then we have, that is the very simple program on your radio button, selecting 1 and 2 and the output as well as you can see on your screen. Now, radio buttons are the toggles tool generally used in your groups. Radio button widgets is very similar to your check button. To get a proper radio behavior, make sure to have all buttons in a group point to the same variable and use the value options to specify what value each button represented out. So this was all for your syntax. Next we'll talk about the options in your radio button. Following are the options which can be used as your key value pairs for configuring the radio button. The very first one is your active background. This is to give the background color when the mouse is over that radio button. Then we have anchor, specifies where the radio button will reside in the last places, that is north, south, east, west, or northeast, and so on. Next we have is your command, that is a function or a method that is to be called when the button is pressed it out. Then we have image. This is just used to display a graphic image instead of your text. Then I have is your select color. This specifies a background color to use when the button is being selected. Then you have select image. This specifies an image to display when the radio button is being selected. Then you have is your indicator that specifies whether or not the indicator should be drawn on your screen or not. Then we have state, which specifies the state of your radio button, that is normal, active, or disabled. Then we have value, which specifies the value to be stored in your button's associated variable. With your variable, this specifies the name of the global variable to set whenever this button is being selected. So as I told you, with your check button and your radio button, the variable entry is very kind of mandatory. you should always use it in order to get the values from your check button and your radio button. Now let's have a look on the hands-on for this. You can see that is the very simple program over here, which is first of all importing the tick enter, making the master window with your master, making the int as your int variable. Now this is the master window I have made, making the integer variable, storing it with my v. Radio button I have called, passing the master in that. The text I have 1 and your 2. And similarly, the variable I have associated with your integer variable. So ultimately, the value of my 1 is 1, value of your text with your 2 is your 2, simply packing on the specified location and calling it on my main loop. So let's have a look on the output. That as you can see, the 1 is your selected one. If I'm selecting the another one, the 2, the 1 automatically gets deselected, and when I'll select the 1 again, the 2 automatically will get deselected. So this is the functioning of your radio button, where at a one time I can only select 1 values in your radio button. Let's have a look on the another example I have for the radio button. That is your tick enter. I'm importing all, making the master window. Modes I have selected, I have provided in kind of a list over here. See, the list have been, that is monochrome is with 1, grayscale is with L, true color is with RGB, and color specification is with CMYK. Simply providing the string value, that is using the string variable, storing in my V, taking the image with your GIF image and using in your img. So for each text and mode in your mode, the mode I have specified in your list format, that is for your each text, and the mode again specified in your inverted commas. So don't get confused, monochrome is the text and your mode will be 1, L, RGB, CMYK simultaneously. So I'm just running a loop for each mode and text in your modes. The radio button should be presented on my text master window with the text provided, variable being set as your Y, and value set to be the mode. So the text monochrome will have the value 1. Again, the grayscale will have the value L. The true color will have the value RGB. And the color separation will have the value CMYK. See, these are the modes associated with your values. Simply when I'll select it, it will print me the green screen on my that, and simply packing in my west side and calling in my main event. So let's have a look on the output. That is, you can see monochrome is selected. It was all was selected, and when I deselected them, you can have a look on the screen. It is giving the background, the selected color as your green, and selecting the all values. But initially when I opened it, so let me just run it again. Now initially you can see all the values have been selected. That is monochrome, grayscale, true color, color separation. All these values have been initially selected. Now when I'll select the one entry on my screen, it will give me the foreground color as my green and select only one entry then. That is, you can see the all entries are being selected, and selecting one entry, the other entries gets into your background color as your green, and the monochrome has been selected. So like check buttons and normal buttons, radio buttons support a command option for registering a callback to handle the presses immediately. Like check button, radio buttons also have a variable attribute for associating single selection buttons in a group and fetching the current selection at arbitrary times, like I did with this code, where I was saving the s, that is integer variable, once and calling it again and again when your loop. In addition, radio buttons have a value attribute that lets you tell the ticketer what value the button's associated variable should have when the button is selected. Because more than one radio button is associated with the same variable, you need to be explicitly tell about each button's value.